Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 a.m. I'll call the commission meeting of the Metropolitan Sewerage District to order. We do have Commissioner Eskridge right now participating virtually. And Commissioner Rummel has just joined too. Okay, so, and then we do have a quorum of the meeting because we have 5 commissioners in the room, 2 participating. Yes, 5 commissioners in the room, 2 participating virtually. And let's see. Welcome to all of our guests. Cassie, would you like to go through the virtual meeting guidance?
Good morning, commissioners, members, and public of the staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. While the commission and staff are in person, we are still offering a Zoom option so members of the public can attend. If you're attending virtually and would like to speak, you can do so during appearances by the public. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube, and the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. Finally, commissioners, please use your microphones while speaking and ensure your mic is off, that the light is turned off, and if you're not speaking, so just make sure the mic is turned off so that others can also utilize the mics. And as a reminder, only 3 of the table mics can be live at a time. And also, please ensure to state your name before speaking for those who may be joining us via Zoom. Those are the decorum rules of the District Commission. Thank you for following them, and let's have a great meeting.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. Let's see, that will take us to announcements. No announcements. So, Eric, you got a couple people to introduce. You want to do them in order?
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Eric Rare, Maintenance and Reliability Manager for the district. I'm here to introduce 2 of our new facilities maintenance workers. First, we have James Dinges. James joined the facilities maintenance team at the end of July. He worked most recently at Zinc Power in Stoughton as a quality lead, overseeing the galvanizing process and products. James went to Madison College and graduated with an IT systems administration degree. He also has mechanical skills that he learned early on in life from his dad and from helping on his grandparents' farm. He looks forward to using those skills and learning new ones on the facilities maintenance crew. James grew up in Stoughton and is in the house hunting process in that area currently. Outside of work, he enjoys tinkering with electronics, making smoked and barbecue meats, and helping repair cars for his friends. Please help me welcome James to the district.
I usually get.
All right, next I'd like to introduce Trevor Kirkpatrick. Trevor joined the facilities maintenance team at the beginning of August. He comes to us from Englehart Motorsports, where he worked for 7 years as a service advisor. His background is mostly in motorcycle mechanics and repair. He completed the motorcycle mechanics program at the Motorcycle Mechanics Institute in Orlando, Florida. Trevor looks forward to growing his skills and getting more hands-on time and a variety in his work as a member of the facilities maintenance crew. Trevor grew up in Janesville, and after moving back from Florida, is happy to be living in his hometown and closer to his family. In his free time, Trevor enjoys fishing, restoring older trucks, and fixing power sports vehicles. Please help me welcome Trevor to the district.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. Okay, that will take us to item 2, appearances by the public. Do we have anybody from the public that wishes to appear? Anybody from the public?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Could you state your name, please?
Sure. My name is Chris Ohm. I live up in Wanakee.
Okay. So you get about 3 minutes, Chris. Tell us what item you're here on and then give your speech. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Sorry I wasn't able to appear in person. I was scheduled for vacation up in northern Wisconsin, and my wife's still recovering from a broken ankle, so I couldn't leave her. Anyway, I'm here to talk about item 4B, Metrogro software. I work for a company that was one of the bidders there, and I'm hoping the committee can reconsider the recommendation from staff that you'll be getting later on today. We were contacted by Lori and told the day after we had our presentation that we would not be selected as the contractor. However, during the presentation that we had the day earlier, and the reaction of the staff, it was apparent that we were substantially lower than any other bid that you had received. Pretty sure that obviously we didn't see the numbers, but by the reaction of the committee that we were probably around half the price of the next lowest bidder. Delasoft is not a new company, flash in the pan. We're a 200-person company. We have offices multiple places across the U.S. as well as India. We've been around for over 20 years, and we started as a computer consulting company, doing staff augmentation, data migration, migrating governments from the old green screen mainframes into the Java world of programming, working with Access databases, converting them to SQL as well as Oracle databases. And for the last 20 years, roughly, we've been creating software for government, predominantly in the permitting arena. However, we've also done specialty permitting for multiple agencies in different states and municipalities. The evaluation team at the presentation felt we couldn't do the project for the amount we had bid. Our estimated hours and costs were enough to complete everything that had been asked for in the RFP. And during the presentation, we went through a listing that the presentation committee had, and where they went, is this included? Is that included? Is this included? And the answer was yes to everything. We did have a question in regard to a third-party connection as far as the software, because we weren't familiar with it. However, we haven't found in 20 years any API software that we can't integrate into. So the feeling we had was it would be included in our bid. We just didn't know enough to say 100% for sure that there would be nothing extra to do that, but we didn't anticipate that it would be. And part of the reason for the price that it was is that we've been doing a lot of work in Wisconsin since I came on board with the company. My boss likes doing work in Wisconsin. We have multiple products recently that we've launched in Wisconsin. We also have one that's still under development with Eau Claire County, and we had one earlier this year go live for the state of Wisconsin. We've had a product in Wisconsin for the state of Wisconsin for about the last 7 years. Our estimated hours and costs are enough to complete everything asked for in the RFP. We're also going to include a basic mobile application. One of the items in the RFP had commented that in the future they wanted to have a strong mobile application, which is all of our products in the permitting arena all have mobile applications, as well as other things that we do also do that because we are integrated into Esri, and being able to do things in the field only makes sense with most of our products that we have. We're also able to do this because we start with a core architecture and tools supporting customization process, workflows, and form creation. And we built products that took things that used to take weeks to do, like creating a fully electronic form, and that basically fills in databases. And the tools we've created took that process for an individual form from a couple of weeks to a day to two. Also, we have an extremely robust workflow engine, which is really easy to use for the end user as well as for us to create and put in place. And our admin interface is another tool that these tools they're behind the scenes and they're working. The customer never sees them. And that's the other thing, so that we're able to leverage these tools to reduce the number of hours. So Lori had made the comment that they wanted that you guys wanted a fully customized system that was only for you. However, by using this information behind the scenes, the architecture and structure, say behind a Windows or a Word, but yet customizing all the forms and all the workflow. So the user, when they come in, the only thing that they see is Madison Metro, the Metrogro product. They don't see anything from Delasoft and how we're creating it. Everything that we're doing is, say, under the hood. Also, one of the advantages that myself, I last year retired from Wisconsin DOT. I'm a professional engineer, civil out of Marquette. I was with Wisconsin DOT for 32 years. I understand the treatment plants. I understand the farmers. I spent my first 25 years at the Madison office for Wisconsin DOT in maintenance, working with farmers as well as roadway issues. So that, and then also a special consultant, which at the time of the interview, I couldn't use his name. But his name is Dave, and he retired recently from Wisconsin DOT. However, that was just to finish up his career. Before that, he was with Wisconsin DNR, and he oversaw the wastewater treatment plant for DNR. He was the engineer for oversight for the North Central region, and when they had a shortfall of staff, he also was working with the for oversight the Northeast region as well. He knows treatment plants, the requirements that DNR has. He has a unique perspective because he was on the other side. He saw and basically received the reports and things that you guys submitted. He is also very familiar with the Metrogro product, Lorganite, the requirements that those products have, and the DNR perspective on what you have to do in order to stay compliant. So I guess that's, and like I said, I realized that we were under the initial bid when it was put out the first time. We added additional monies in to come in and travel to bring the team in. As I said, one of the advantages, I'm here in Waunakee. I told the group at the presentation, if you have anything that's a problem or you need to be seen in the field rather than just the scheduled items, you can give me a call. We can go out and take a look at whatever question or thing you want the contractor to see, and we'll bring in the staff from our home office in Delaware anytime when there's a problem or that you feel that you need to see them. So I think you're going to have a lot more connection to the community and to the area. And like I said, I was out in the field for 25 years. So, I mean, spreading and applications, and I am as far as working with farmers and applying product, and now in winter maintenance, it's all about spread rates for liquid salts, liquid dispensers. So, I mean, I understand the process that you guys use and what's entailed, but I guess thanks for the time. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I guess I'll be hanging around to see what happens on 4B.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's see. Do you have any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4A, which is to consider and possibly take action on recommendations from the Executive Director's Search Subcommittee. I'll give you a report as to what the subcommittee did today. Today, we had a discussion with Raftelis. Oh, I did miss consent. I'm sorry. I flipped it over and covered it up with I'm sorry. We'll go back to the consent calendar. 3A to 3E, the approval of the 725 minutes, cash statement to capital, sanitary sewer extension plans, Waunakee and Verona, pump station bar screens, being added now back in. An authorized agreement with Town of Westport Northeast Interceptor Wanakee Extension. Anybody have any questions on those? No? Okay, motion.
It's Wilson. I'll move approval of the consent calendar as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by
This is Commissioner Freeze. I'll second.
Commissioner Freeze. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Sorry about that. I'm trying to. Mine is getting ahead of me. Okay, so anyway, I was just saying on the recommendation of the Executive Director Search Subcommittee, Ref Tellis was present at our meeting today. Most of the meeting was spent on the job description, where we think we've got it finalized. We'll take a vote on it when we get the final draft from the changes that we made today. Mike will be getting that to us. We'll act on that on the 22nd of August, and then that'll be coming to the commission for approval on the 22nd of August as well. I think it's safe to say that Ref Tellis was very impressed with the work that we have done in creating that job description, and they plan to use good sections of it in their recruitment materials. So talking about the recruitment materials, at the next meeting, they'll kind of be talking about their recruitment plan and some of the draft text that they'll have, and then the subcommittee will kind of receive that from them. Any comments that we have, we'll make to Mike, and then Mike will kind of get back to them and formulate the final thing, and then I'll get it back to the subcommittee kind of because we wouldn't meet again until the middle of September, but before that date, in order to give a thumbs up to it. And then the idea is that they will be having this material out basically right after Labor Day. Labor Day is kind of the critical juncture point. So the process with Ref Tellis is with the recruitment plan, and then they'll have a few touch points with the committee or the commission. And the first one will be on candidate screening before candidates are interviewed. And I'm thinking after some discussion with the subcommittee that will be basically probably the responsibility of the subcommittee, meeting with Ref Tellis to go through whatever 10, 8, 11, whatever number of candidates that they wish to select or wish to have selected for interviews. But any commission member is welcome to attend any of our meetings, and we do take input. We even take it from Greg. Then the second point is the virtual interviews, which is basically the first set of interviews with candidates. Roughly, say about 5 or so candidates are chosen for the virtual interview process. So I'm thinking again that will be the full subcommittee. The subcommittee will do that, but any commission members are welcome to attend and participate. And then the final will be the in-person interviews of about 3 candidates typically. And then we're basically at Ref Tellis felt this too, that it should be the whole commission who would be doing the interviews at that point in time. So the whole idea is that we'll probably be, and they're really getting on top of this to get this out in, right after Labor Day. We've been hoping to have somebody selected in December. So I suppose it's possible, depending on how long this process takes, interviews I was always expecting in November, but maybe they might be a little sooner depending on how things move with them. So that's kind of what the process sits. And so any commission members welcome to attend our subcommittee meetings. And so we'll be meeting again at 7:30 a.m. on the 22nd of August with the commission meeting to follow at 9. Anybody have any questions on any of this information that we went through? I want to thank the subcommittee for going through. We made good progress today on the job description. Beth?
This Commissioner Boltzmann, I just want to make a thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for all the input that we received, the subcommittee received from staff, from the owner communities, because we really took that to heart and really tried to incorporate all that input. And we'll talk more about that when we present the job description, but we really did try to take that input and incorporate all of that into our thinking and into what went into the job description. So I just wanted to say again, thank you for that input. We really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you, Beth. Yeah, we'll talk more in detail at the 22nd meeting. So that will take us to 4B, which is the item that Mr. Ohm talked about. Review of proposal and award a contract for Metrogro software system development. Lori Dunn.
Good morning. I'm Lori Dunn. I'm one of the district technology managers. I'm here today to provide you with some background information on the Metrogro software system development project. Amanda, could you go to the next slide, please? During today's presentation, I'll briefly describe the current Metrogro software system, its history, and why we need to replace it. I'll describe the process that we use to gather and prioritize the requirements for that new system. I'll provide background on the process the project team took to evaluate the proposals we received, and include information on our selected consultant, ATC, and describe what put them ahead of the other firms. And there'll also be time for questions at the end. Next slide. Thank you. Metrogro is a high-performing program that is essential for plant operations, and it provides benefits to area farmers. Metrogro biosolids applications cover multiple counties, not only Dane, but also Green, Rock, Columbia, Jefferson, and Dodge counties. On an annual basis, Metrogro moves approximately 38 million gallons of the district biosolids that have been recovered from our treatment processes onto area farm fields. Annually, this comes out to about 7,100 semi-trailer loads applied to 5,500 acres. Other benefits of the Metrogro program include promoting sustainability through resource recovery, reducing the use of commercial fertilizer, saving taxpayer dollars by reducing district storage costs, and assuring public health and safety through alignment of our biosolids applications with regulatory guidelines from the DNR and EPA. Our current software system supports the Metrogro program in multiple ways, including calculating biosolids application rates, providing a record-keeping system for trips, applications, and biosolids analytical results, managing farmer customer information, processing records for reports and submittals to regulatory agencies, maintaining a history of those regulatory reports, and providing tools to assist users with looking at trends in biosolids analytical and field application data. Our current Metrogro system was developed on a Microsoft Access platform over 20 years ago. Because of its age and the limitations of the Access platform, we are experiencing several significant challenges. For many years, IT and Metrogro staff have worked to extend the system with enhancements and reconfigurations to cover new needs. This takes time, and the work is increasingly complicated. Additionally, as the system has been extended, it has also become increasingly fragmented, and this fragmentation makes it difficult to manage and understand. For processes that are not easily automated using Access tools, we have resorted to manual processes and external integrations, and these have further fragmented the system. We're also limited by Access's reporting tools, so more sophisticated and helpful reporting, dashboards, business intelligence tools are not available. These are common in modern systems, and they are becoming increasingly an expectation of staff. We feel that now is the time to look for a new software system. Initially, we did look into the possibility of an off-the-shelf solution. What we found was software that could only meet some of our needs, so multiple packages would be required. We felt like this would result in another fragmented system, and managing multiple pieces could be challenging. So after this search, we moved forward with pursuing a customized software system. Because software development can be especially challenging, we knew that forming the right team was very important. The district put together a Metrogro system development team that would include staff from the many areas involved with the Metrogro program and from all levels of the organization. Executive sponsorship and organizational support are coming from the district principal engineer and the enterprise services director. Project management will be provided by the district technology manager, and the core team will include members from the work groups that make up the core operations of the Metrogro program software systems. This includes staff from Metrogro, operations and maintenance, IT and GIS, and the laboratory. After we formed this team, we moved on to a user assessment. Again, because software development can be so challenging, the user assessment step was very important. Having a good assessment, which would document the district's needs and priorities for a new system, can lower the risk of scope creep, timeline slippage, and budget overages. For our assessment, we wanted expert assistance, so we hired Yahara Software. Yahara Software provides software development services, so they had the expertise we needed to lead the assessment process. Using an outside entity also allowed district staff to focus on their requirements and ideas for the new system, while Yahara managed the assessment process. Additionally, Yahara used the information discovered to provide the district with the first draft of the RFP that we would eventually post to solicit the software development firms. The user assessment work was not only helpful for developing the RFP, but it also helped to develop readiness in the project team by making members more aware of software requirements, the software development processes, and the level of effort that will be required to support the project. An important part of the user assessment work was developing the concept of leveling up to a new system as a way to understand and communicate the high-level goals for the project. This diagram is one of the outputs of that work. We are currently at level 1, where we have a precarious system that needs significant stewardship from staff. The technology is outdatable and not easily expandable, and we have many manual processes. The goal for our project is to move to level 2. Some of the highlights are a durable and extensible framework that this will include a robust design, one that will minimize risks for failures, keep our data safe, and reflects good standard practices. The new system must be able to incorporate modern functions and tools like cloud computing, GIS, mobility functions, and modern cybersecurity protections. And the new system will include user-focused tools to support adaptable workflows and self-service reporting. So using the results of the user assessment and the leveling up concept, Yahara and the team developed the RFP. Our RFP was created to be all-encompassing. We wanted it to provide clear details and requirements to prospective proposers so the district would receive quality responses. So not only did the RFP include technical requirements and a timeline, but also requirements for project management, expectations for collaboration, and an extensive list of questions to be answered in responses. The RFP also required that the selected consultant use an agile Scrum approach for the development work. This highly collaborative development process helps to assure core requirements are met. It reduces scope creep, allows early testing by future users, and it provides regularly scheduled sessions for reflections to continuously improve processes throughout the duration of the project. Because the Metrogro project would span multiple years and the work would be challenging, selecting the right consultant was especially important. We created a two-step solicitation process to help with the selection. We knew it would take a bit more time, but we also felt if we go slow now and select the right consultant, then we can probably go faster later. The The project team was committed to the two-step process to learn as much as possible about the proposing firms and their approach. During the first step, we would focus on the proposals, and during the second step, we focused more on the firms. During our first round, a review of the proposals, we had 20 consultants respond to our RFP. 5 of those did not meet our core requirements, so those were removed from the process. The remaining 15 proposals were reviewed by the project team. These were evaluated on consultant ability, experience, plan district involvement, beneficial timeline, and the value of the pricing proposed. After evaluation and scoring by the team, the top 5 scoring proposals, highlighted at the top of the listing, were moved on to the second evaluation round. In the second round, the top 5 firms were invited to interview with the Metrogro system development team. During the interview, they had the opportunity to make a presentation that expanded upon their proposals and further explained their approach for our project. They were also given a list of specific questions to answer during their interview. The district project team used this round to not only better understand the firm's project approach, but to also understand more about the firm's team, skill sets, and the care that they took to understand our project needs. The scoring criteria for this round evaluation included project approach, consultant experience, plan district involvement and communications, and value pricing. American Technology Consulting, or ATC, scored the highest by the team and was selected as our preferred consultant. ATC stood out in the professionalism shown during the interview and their approach that focused on collaboration. The presentation content reflected significant time spent analyzing our RFP and the supplied technical documents. We felt that they truly understood the project scope, and the skill sets of their proposed project staffing impressed us. They would provide Agile Scrum specialists, and their proposed team would be specifically assigned to our project. Presentation team showed a high interest and respect for our project by having several team members coming on site for the interview. We also appreciated their experience working with other public sector entities and experiencing working with customers in the agricultural area, including leveraging GIS tools for that work. Their proposed timeline aligned with our requirements and respected restrictions on district staff time during the Metrogro hauling season. ATC had the highest score while also having the second lowest cost. We felt that this reflected a high value proposal. So today we ask for your adoption of the resolution to award a contract to ATC to provide services for the Metrogro software system development project. Thank you. Any questions?
Tom?
A couple things. One, I liked your report on what we got. I thought it was really spot on, and I understand your recommendation and where it came from. But just a couple questions. Did Chris Holmes say anything that would have made you want to go back and reevaluate things based on what he said? And the second thing is, Delasoft was initially ahead of them. What went wrong at the interview, just in general, that really changed all that, because it was significant change? And then the third thing is, Chris Holmes lives 6 doors down from me, and I know him very well. He was on our Public Works Committee at the town of Westport and our Plan Commission for many, many years. So it's really hard for me not to be a little biased here about anything that he would say, because he's somebody that I really trust. I mean, he did a really good job for us on projects that we had and things like that, telling us what to do. So I don't even know that I really should vote on this, but I think those 2 questions probably help the commission understand why there was all of a sudden this change. Thanks.
Sure. On the first question, Chris didn't say anything new during his presentation here today than presented during the interview. So none of that would probably change our minds on what we decided. The first round, of evaluation, because there was a little more weight put on pricing, Delasoft did get into the top 5. But the second round, that's why we felt that the 2-round process was a good thing to do. The second round, we really found out more about how well those teams understood what we were asking for and how well they had a plan that would help us meet those requirements. ATC spent significant time looking at our requirements, and they did a lot of analysis up front. They spent significant time, so they seemed real committed to the project, and they wanted it. And that gave us a lot of confidence. Delasoft mostly just presented their project. They didn't really explain how it integrated with our particular project, so we didn't really know how that was going to work. They did get included after the first round because, you know, they were local, it was the pricing, we were curious, but their proposed product wasn't what we really asked for. It's not a custom development software. It's a framework system with forms, and that wasn't what we asked for. We were curious to see what would develop, and they didn't really show us how that system could provide us with a project and meet our needs. And then, what was the last question? Oh, okay.
There was no question. It was just me
Yeah.
expounding like I have been known to do in the past.
Okay. The software was a curiosity. It looked interesting, but it just didn't seem like a good fit for what we're looking for.
Okay, anyone else? Ken, go ahead.
Lori, any idea what the ongoing expenses or monthly expenses to support this after it's implemented?
That will depend on there'll be 2 ways that we could take that. One, we could provide most of the support internally because of the skill set of our programmers. Depending on what the workload is, we do have the option, ATC does have the option for us to purchase ongoing maintenance and support. I don't know what the cost of that would be, and it may have to be negotiated. Maybe there's a hybrid between the 2. I'm just not sure.
Okay, I didn't know if that was any part of the implementation decision-making process at all, because guess is that if we go with ATC, which I'm in support of, there's going to be some type of ongoing we're connected with custom software.
Yeah, there definitely could be. We did ask for development to be on platforms and using tools that our internal staff are used to. But it is helpful to have those type of relationships. A lot of times they save money in the long run because our staff don't always have time to dig into the issues.
Okay, anyone else? Greg?
Yep, this is Commissioner Freeze. Just, I'm looking at attachment 4, round 2 interview scores. And I just want to make sure I understand the difference here. So first of all, I see how you rank price was only 10% of this score. So I can see how Delasoft, even though they were significantly less, would have not scored as high because, you know, price was a much lesser consideration in this round. But the team score, right, is dramatically different between everybody else and them. So I just want to make sure in my head, the big reason here is because they are proposing an approach, at least our understanding, significantly different than what I would say the top 4 were, right? It's not necessarily there's a problem with the company, it's just that the product they're pitching is not what you want. Am I understanding this correctly?
I think that's a good summary of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? So I got a question for you, Lori. Kind of take a little back in time. We had Microsoft Access, and was that integrated with our Esri system?
No, we couldn't really effectively integrate that, so that was one of the pieces that's had to sit outside, and we want that to be integrated in this future system.
Right, and so the future system will in fact integrate with the GIS that we...
Yeah, right now even the databases are separate, so the data will be integrated with each other, and then we'll see how the applications shape
Because
up.
Esri is nothing but a database, think of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to get back, part of I guess another question is, how long do we think this software will last?
If we make it, if it's custom and we make it extensible, it can last, you know, over 10 years. I mean, Dark is a good example where that's a customized system that we also developed. And that's over 10 years old, and we made it with the same kind of extensible traits that we want to have in this next system. And we're still using that system, we're expanding it. There's been a couple times where we've had external support to help us make enhancements, but mostly we can maintain that in-house and keep it going. It's hard to, my crystal ball, but I think if we design it correctly, it will last for a good long while.
Okay, so do you think, just thinking out loud here, do you think that this kind of system we're getting from ATC is one that the district may be able to make modifications to itself, or that they're proprietary and such that any changes made, you have to go back to ATC? Kind of gets the Ken's support question.
We actually, there's a requirement for this project that all the code, everything that goes into it is owned by the district and will be handed over to the district at the end. So it will be our system.
Okay, so then if we have the capability in-house, we could make modifications
Yeah,
to keep it functional and meet our needs.
Yeah, and we are requiring them to use tools that our staff have experience with.
Okay, good, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else have a comment or question? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion. Okay, motion by Commissioner Clark to approve. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Freeze, I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Clark, second by Commissioner Freeze. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 I'm an abstention. Tom.
And one abstention, okay. So, or any opposed? No opposed, one abstention, others ayes. Thank you. That will move us to budgeting process in 2025 budget preview. Ben?
One more thing, Tom, on that last item. Thanks for letting Chris have a little extra time to explain to us, you know, what his issues were. That was kind, and I think he got everything out he wanted. Appreciate it.
Ben, you're up. This is Ben Nerad.
Good morning, Ben Nerad. I'm a policy advisor at the district, and I'm here today to provide a study session on the district budgeting process and preview on the 2025 budget. So the agenda for my presentation, I'll start with that overview, walk through the district's fund structure and our budgeting process, provide a bit of a preview on 2025, what we're seeing right now, and then talk about the next steps in our budgeting process. So the district's budgeting process includes all three major funds that we use for our expenditures. So that includes operating, capital, and debt funds. I'll talk about all three in kind in terms of the purpose and how we budget for them, but I think it's important to consider kind of that broad view as we go into our budgeting process. In addition, we look over multiple years, right? So, of course, a big part of our budgeting process is the next year, right? In this case, 2025, but we're really looking over the course of the entire 6-year CIP period. And that allows us to do a couple of things as noted here. One, it allows us to smooth rates. And two, and related, it allows us to plan for future spending, right? So if we know we've got a big project upcoming, we can plan for that financially. So in terms of the operating fund, and this might be one that is perhaps most familiar to people, the purpose, we pay for staff and supply costs, right? Salaries, utility bills, what have you. The operating fund receives most of the revenue. So in terms of our service charge revenue, which is our major source of revenue, that's coming into the operating fund. And we also use the operating fund to do transfers to our capital and debt funds, right? So we've got most of the money coming into the operating fund and then a portion of those funds going to capital and debt for those purposes. So when we look at budgeting for the operating fund, we're taking a few steps as you might expect. So one, estimating expenses, right? So we're looking into the next year. What is staffing going to look like? What are staff expenses going to be? Supplies, and then those transfers to capital and debt, as I talked about. We estimate non-service charge revenues, right? So while service charges are our primary source of revenue, we do have some other sources, right? We receive revenue for servicing pumping stations. We receive revenue for struvite sales, septage receiving, what have you. So we estimate what the aggregate revenues from those sources will be. And then essentially what's left over in terms of the revenue need is our service charge revenue requirement, right? So we're taking all of our operating expenses, soaking some of those expenses up with other sources of revenue, and then whatever is left over is that service charge revenue requirement. For each of our three funds, we have a reserves approach, right? We're setting money aside so that we can weather the storm, so to speak, in some cases literally, to address, additional costs or lesser revenues. So on the operating fund side, our approach is to cover 180 to 210 days of operating expenses. And again, that's generally if service charge revenues come in lower, operating expenses come in higher, that allows us to have a source of funding to dip into. I'll move now to our capital fund. In terms of the purpose there, twofold. First, we pay upfront costs for infrastructure projects until the DNR reimburses us, right? So the majority of our infrastructure projects are funded through the DNR Clean Water Fund loan program. And under that program, we have to pay essentially cash upfront for those construction expenses, and then we receive reimbursement after that. So we use the capital fund monies to pay for those upfront costs. And then additionally, we pay for cash funded projects, right? So a smaller portion of our projects are cash funded, and those monies come from our capital fund. So as we're putting together our budget for the capital fund, we are working through our CIP process, right? So in the last meeting, Todd presented on our CIP, our capital plan. And so really our capital fund budgeting is essentially the financing plan to pay for those projects. And then as we have those project costs and project schedules, we're determining the funding source for those projects, which is, primarily a cash versus debt question. But now we have the additional nuance of, debt could be sourced from the Clean Water Fund program or from bonding, as you heard in our presentation in the last meeting. As we're putting together that capital fund budget, we are looking at expected fund revenues. So it includes, as I mentioned, the DNR Clean Water Fund reimbursement. It includes the transfers from the operating fund. And then our connection charge revenue goes exclusively to the capital fund. So those revenues, our connection charges are, when we have new developments that want to connect to our collection system and treatment plant, they have to pay connection charges. And so that goes into our capital fund, and we use that to pay for these construction expenses. One thing I want to note, I think one of the questions has been, if we have money left over, right? So if we don't spend what we expect out of our capital fund for whatever reason, projects aren't moving forward as quickly as we thought, what happens, right? That money is retained in the capital fund, and it's used for future authorized project spending, right? So it doesn't go away. It's not used for kind of non-capital project related purposes, that money is retained. And so, you know, we don't need to raise service charges down the road for those same dollars, essentially. As with the operating fund, we have a reserves approach for our capital fund. The purpose there, you know, providing a buffer against the risk of lower fund revenue and any unexpected or emergency work that requires, you know, capital construction. One thing I want to note with some more details to come is we're reviewing the methodology to calculate our capital fund reserve amount with PFM, right? So PFM, our financial advisor, came on board to help us with bonding, but they've got a lot of expertise on financing and work with a lot of sewer utilities. So we've been able to draw on that expertise and have some discussions about our capital fund reserves. I'll talk more about this in a minute, but you know, going back a handful of years, we spent our capital fund down much more than we wanted to, under kind of our fund reserve requirement. In part, I think at the time we were waiting on some DNR reimbursement, right? So we have these real risks of not getting revenues to that fund in a timely manner. So following that, you know, over drawdown, I'll say, we worked to build that up. And we've done that in part to mitigate that risk, and in part related to the fact that our capital program is expanding, right, as Todd presented last time. So, you know, we need to calibrate the capital fund. We're in this kind of new world of having a higher capital fund program. We want to mitigate those risks. We think that there's an opportunity to at least marginally draw down our capital fund reserves while still being able to have sufficient funds to mitigate those risks. And in doing so, that'll provide kind of a relieving pressure, I'll say, on our service charge requirements. So more to come there. You know, we want to do this in a really thoughtful and planful way, right? We need those reserves to be in place given the real risks that we've experienced, but we think that there are some opportunities there to draw those reserves down to a degree, and that'll, you know, be part of our budget process and our budget proposal that we'll present next month. Finally, our debt fund. So the purpose there, we're paying principal and interest loan payments on those infrastructure project loans. So today, the Clean Water Fund loan program. And from a budgeting and reserves perspective, we have a DNR requirement that essentially guides our work there. So we're putting enough aside in that fund such that we can pay the next year's principal and interest payments. So a couple of final notes just in terms of our budget process. As I mentioned, we do this over a multi-year period, in particular on the capital side, right? We've got this 6-year CIP, so we can attach a financing plan to that, allows for the rate smoothing, allows us to plan for future large expenses. That said, one of the challenges that we have in working over that time span is short-term changes can impact that full 6-year trajectory, right? So we may say, oh, for next year, we could reduce service charges because we don't need as much funding in our capital fund, for example. Well, that can impact the entire 6-year trajectory. So if we have big projects coming out in year 3 and 4, maybe now we don't have enough money set aside. So that's something that we can assess and address through our budget development and modeling process. But I bring that up to kind of plant the seed so that as we go into our budget conversations, again, it's not just about the 2025 conversation, it's this broader 6-year pathway, and we need to be aware of, okay, you want to tweak something on 2025, that's going to have some downstream impacts as well. So that's just a quick tour of our budgeting process and our fund structure. I want to pause there, see if there are any questions, comments before I go into the 2025 preview.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? I've got one. So, Ben, you talked about PFM giving some advice on basically probably our cash reserves, right? So are you seeing any substantial or significant changes that they'll be recommending relative to our cash reserves that excuse me, that we should be aware of? Like, are they saying it should be less or more, or what's the deal?
Yeah, so we talked with them about our reserves across all three funds, right? So operating, capital, and debt. I think on operating fund, the 180-day standard that we have in place now, as we talked to them about it, it's I think pretty consistent with what they see industry-wide. They didn't think that there were additional risks there that we needed to mitigate or address by, increasing or, for that matter, decreasing. Similar on the debt side, right? Because we have that DNR requirement in place, it kind of dictates what we need to do, and that is, having that money set aside in advance is really sufficient, right? Our principal and interest payments are extremely predictable, right? Because we know exactly what loans we have out, and just as paying your mortgage, what next year is going to look like. We know what our P&I is going to look like for the next year. Capital is where we're focusing our attention. We think that based on the conversations that we've had with PFM, there is an opportunity to draw down our capital cash reserves to a degree. So that's something that we are working on modeling now and looking at, what the impact of that is. It's something that we're looking at over, I would say, the entire 6-year time span, right? As I mentioned, we work to do capital financing in particular over the full course of the CIP. And so we're looking at, how can we draw down those reserves in a thoughtful way that mitigates risk, but still, maybe reduces it to a degree based on, the risk that we are seeing in the mitigation of risk that we want to do. So,
Bill? This is Bill Walker, Interim Executive Director. I want to emphasize something. Ben already mentioned it, but I think it's important context. 5-6 years ago, capital fund reserves were kind of dangerously and distressingly low. So we adjusted our approach a little bit to cover some of the risks we're facing that he alluded to. What we're hearing from PFM is that adjustment we made is sort of generally consistent with their advice. So they're not recommending any sort of fundamental changes in how we think about this, but they are bringing, the way I like to think about it, more rigor and detail than what we were able to do, and it's in that fine-tuning that we're seeing the potential for some reductions.
I just, I'd been involved with borrowing when I worked, and cash reserves were always a very critical part of that whole bond rating and everything else. So, and I was curious because you had mentioned before about how we kind of got down low and then we built them up. It's not so much the approaches, but tinkering with the approach that maybe lowers it a little bit. But I don't want to get into a situation like we were in before, and all of a sudden you get a perfect storm because you drew down your cash reserves, your expenses are going off the roof, and other things. Ken?
Ben, what are our current cash reserves, like $5 million?
In the capital fund, it's, I don't want to guess.
Approximation is fine.
It's in that realm. It's in that realm. Yeah.
And that's designed so that if we would not collect money from our member communities, we would be able to cover our expenses. Is that correct?
It's mitigating against that risk. It's mitigating against the risk of lower connection charge revenues as well, because those revenues are coming in. And then it's mitigating against risk on the expenditure side as well, in terms of if projects are significantly more expensive than we expected, or if there are, emergency urgent projects that we need to fund out of that capital fund. So that's kind of the risk as we see it that we're mitigating against. Yeah, and right, and thank you. And as I mentioned before, that reimbursement delay from the DNR, which is a critical risk, yeah.
So that's the cash flow, ups and downs.
Yep.
What is a bonding company, what would they like to see us at? 180 days,
so
20 million?
So that's been a benefit of being able to talk to PFM about this reserve requirement and have them also be our, bonding advisor. From their perspective, the approach that that we are looking at taking with them is a healthy one. There's not a clear rubric like 180 days where we need to solve for. It's more, I would say, building a fund reserve that's well matched with the risk that we face. The additional advice that we heard from PFM is that because we have the option, though we don't want to elect to use it, we have the option of levying a property tax that allows us to fulfill a lot of what the rating agencies would be concerned about or be wondering about. So because we have that authority, that GO authority, we can pursue that form of bonding, which is more attractive from an interest rate perspective compared to a revenue bond, which would be kind of directly tied to our service charge revenue. So in any case, it's matching risk levels with the fund balance and having that levying authority kind of in our back pocket, so to speak, that should allow us to move forward in a pretty good way into the bonding market based on what we've heard.
Okay, and so I have one more question. On the cash flow ebbs and flows, I'll call them, between what we pay out, what the district pays out, and what the DNR reimburses us back at, is that $5 million swing from time to time? Is it?
That's a good question. I don't have a number in front of me, but we've done analysis on that, and I can say I can speak conceptually, and then we could come back with numbers if you'd like, but at least conceptually, as we've increased the size of our capital program, those swings get bigger, right? And so the risk level gets higher as your capital program expands, just because you have more of that upfront spending that you're then waiting for, and those timelines of the DNR are, largely out of our control after we submit that request for reimbursement.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have Commissioner Rummel had her hand up, and then Commissioner Freeze. Oh, Amanda, you had something?
Both Commissioner Rummel and Eskridge have their hands up before Commissioner Freeze.
so.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't.
Thank you, Chair and everyone. I know I regret missing our last meeting because I guess we had a really in-depth discussion about the bond. And I will go watch that meeting again. So, when they're in the vacation mode, you don't necessarily think, oh, I can go watch a meeting, but I will. My question, maybe you've kind of answered it, Ben, through these other questions, but I am struck by the notes from last meeting that sort of indicate that going forward, our ratio of DNR funds versus bond funds is, what is it, 80-20? And it just seems like I'm hearing mostly about the requirements from the DNR for the debt fund. And I just want to maybe have you dive in a little bit about any changes with this new way of seeking revenue will affect our planning and yeah, because it sounded like you said that the DNR requires us to have next year's monies, and does that change? And just help me understand the difference. Thank you.
Sure. Yep, Ben Nerad. Good question. And that's something that we have started to talk to PFM about. To my knowledge, there's not a similar specific requirement on the bonding side as there is on the Clean Water Fund loan side in terms of having those payments essentially in reserve in advance of the year of the payments. It's generally about what I understand is the rating agencies want to know that you are generally setting aside money for P&I, for principal and interest payments, and that you have the ability to pay for them. Based on the discussions that we've had with PFM so far, I think the expectation is that we'll take a similar approach on bonding principal and interest payments as we do on the Clean Water Fund loan payments, and set those monies aside in advance out of simplicity. There are other approaches that other utilities take where they're setting money aside through the course of the year for that year's payments. And so there are approaches that we could look at that would, maybe be in that direction. But I think at least in the preliminary conversations we've had around that so far, I think we'll likely end up taking a similar approach and setting those monies aside. But there is not, again, to my knowledge, a similar, very clear requirement on the bonding side as there is on the Clean Water Fund loan side. But we can kind of just conveniently latch onto that approach.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Eskridge, then Commissioner Freeze.
Thanks. More of a comment to reinforce something that you said, Ben, that I think is really important because we hear it regularly from our owner communities, or at least I feel like I've heard it recently. And you noted that when we collect money expecting to spend something in our capital plan and we don't spend as much as we expected in our capital plan, that is calculated into future service charges because we still have that money. So sometimes I feel like there's a perception that when we are expecting to spend more in our capital plan, we're somehow taking in more money than we need, and that's somehow hurting us in service charges. But I just want to make the point that you made and reinforce that we're accounting for that in our service charges that we're doing, in future years. So it's not like we're over collecting and then that's not being reflected for our owner communities. Is that a correct summarization of what you said?
Yeah, Ben, you're right. Yeah, that's correct, right? So we are setting aside, when we have a project that we expect to do, we're putting monies aside to ensure that we can pay for that project up front if there isn't sufficient funding in the capital fund, and to ensure that we can pay principal and interest payments. Also, if it's a cash funded project, we'll be setting those monies aside. If we don't end up doing that project, that money is still there in our fund balances. And so, all else equal, we won't need to raise service charges next year to pay for that because the money is already there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
This is Bill Walker. I'm going to pile on to that point. It's, I think, obvious, but worth emphasizing. The same is true if we find ourselves in a year where our spending went faster than we had planned. We incorporate that fact into the setting of future service charges, which is, to me, the great benefit and power of having a capital fund managed in this way. You don't have to get any single year precisely right, and with the disruption that causes to your own finances and the finances of those who pay. You have time to adjust a little bit more gradually over a 2-year basis.
Okay, Greg?
Yeah, hi, Ben. Just Commissioner Freeze, sorry. This is 2 quick questions. One, with regard to reimbursement from the DNR Clean Water Fund. I should know this, but we don't use the Clean Water Fund that often. Do you have to wait to the very end and then submit, or do you get to submit along the way? Because some of our capital projects are obviously 2 years long, and they're tens of millions of dollars. So that can make a big. So go ahead.
Yeah, Ben, you're right. We can submit for reimbursement along the way, right? So basically, as construction starts and we start incurring expenses, we can batch those up and submit those for reimbursement. We tend to have kind of a larger reimbursement request at the kind of the close of the project as well, but we're generally looking to get revenues along the way, just to your point that these projects can be long in duration. So, yeah.
Okay, and then I'll follow up on the discussion that Sarah started and you guys kind of added to. So we have the, Bill, you alluded to the fact that, our capital project can go faster, slower, and we have a little bit of ability to adjust. So the question that I have had posed to me is on years like this, where you are treating roughly 20% more volume because of I&I than you would have budgeted for this year's rates. And I fully recognize for Eric and other technical people here, the pumping is not free, right? So but you are collecting more revenue, and it's probably not a 1-to-1. So there is a gain here, I'll call it, a cash windfall that we were not anticipating. And after you take out expenses. So where does that money go? And I assume then that is also accounted for Todd's gonna take a guess at what flows are gonna be next year as well, right? Which is, of course, just a guess. And, we are going to use, what I'm getting at is, where does that go? Where does that money hang out, in the interim?
Sure, Ben Nerad. So if service charge revenues come in higher than expected, those monies are in our operating fund, right? And you made the point, we know we do have higher pumping electrical expenses this year, right? So there's going to be some offsetting. We have commission policy that essentially tells us what to do if our operating fund reserves get over 210 days. And that's essentially how that would operationalize, meaning if we've got too much in our, quote unquote, too much in our operating fund, it would be beyond that 210-day threshold, at which point commission policy outlines basically a stepped approach in terms of what to use those funds for. And I don't have it memorized, but it speaks to funding the capital program. It speaks to buying down service charges. It speaks to ensuring that we're complying with another DNR requirement related to an equipment replacement fund, which I can get into if we'd like, but that's essentially how that's operationalized. Now, one of the challenges with that is a timing challenge, because we don't have a good sense of what, if we have exceeded that 210-day reserve until well after the end of the year, right? Because we don't have a very clear vision on all of our expenditure until really after we've gotten through the year. And so, you know, I think one of the future discussions, I think, is commission policy reflecting how we can actually operationalize that? Because when we are putting our budget together, we're looking at essentially audited numbers from the prior year. That's our best source of information. And that's really the point in time when we also would know if we're over that 210-day threshold. And so, you know, if we're under that 210-day, that money is in the operating fund, is going to our budgeting process, and we're all else equal, lowering service charges because we don't need that revenue. That's kind of maybe the short answer to your question. The longer answer is, there are some challenges with operationalizing our commission policy that are probably worth us taking a look at it as we move forward.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay. Anyway, I had a comment. You know, I think it was the last meeting or the meeting before that, we approved a project with a lot of electrical equipment that takes 2 years out. So I think whatever we do, we have to be more cognizant that time delays are seem to be more and more, even though now we're a few years past COVID, it's still present. So I don't know if it'll ever correct or not, but we need to have that flexibility to be able to adjust, because projects like that, you know, when it takes 2 years just to get a piece of equipment, you've approved it, you've basically set aside money for that project, knowing that it's going to cost that, but the expenditures are spread over a much longer period of time than what you would have anticipated. And I think, I do understand that I don't think we really discussed that much when we set the 210-day limit, but that does make, I can understand that problem. The worst, but we also have the other side of the cat too, where you get a dry year like last year, and all of a sudden our revenues are not, you know, maybe we're barely hitting at our 180 days. I don't know how we felt. And then we always were getting these projects that were costing more. Sometimes they were reduced by those that cost less. We're always kind of playing this game. And then we get our unintended consequences, like we had with the bridge and the belt line, the Interceptor under the belt line. Got a similar situation over by Goose Lake. All these kind of things, you know, play in. And they may not be a lot of money, but it only takes a few projects, and all of a sudden, you know, you kind of see our cash reserves. So it's a hard game to play. So, is I guess my statement that with the flexibility, whatever we do, future policies we need to maintain flexibility, just because the world is different today than it was 8 years ago.
All right. So with that, I'll move into a brief 2025 budget preview. What I'd like to just describe today, you know, we're putting some of the finishing touches on it, but I want to just talk about some budget cost drivers and mitigating factors that we're seeing now, so that you've got a sense of how things are shaping up. So in terms of budget drivers and cost drivers, you know, we talked about electrical relative to pumping, but I think we're seeing electrical, gas, water, you know, really utility rates for the other utilities increase as well, and that's hitting our bottom line. It's something that we're accounting for in our 25 budget. Similar, the chemicals that we use as part of the treatment process, we're seeing costs increasing there. So again, these are kind of our critical operational costs. We also, as mentioned, we're modeling higher interest rates as to the degree that we are taking on bonding instead of the Clean Water Fund loan program. We're going to be paying higher interest rates as part of that, so that's going to be a cost driver. And then consideration of staffing needs, right? So we do see some pretty critical, you know, frontline kind of operational positions that are going to be part of the budget proposal. So more to come on those soon. But just so that folks are aware, you know, we went through a process last year of identifying staffing needs really district-wide, and I think this is kind of a continuation of that. So we'll certainly talk more about that as part of the budget introduction next month, but want to put that on people's radar. So those are some of the things that are driving costs higher. We do have some mitigating factors as well. So first, we're expecting higher connection charge revenue. So last year, when we were putting our budget together, you know, if we can put ourselves back a year ago, we were seeing the Federal Reserve, you know, increasing, having high interest rates for really the first time in decades. And I think the expectation then is that we'd see a slowdown in the housing market sufficient to really impact those revenues we receive when new developments connect to our system. And that has not come to fruition, right? So we've seen higher than expected connection charge revenue this year, and we expect that to continue to a degree. Now I do want to caution that's a relatively minor source of revenue as compared to service charges, but it's still there, and it's going to be a mitigating factor. And then, as I mentioned before, we're looking at that potential drawdown on our capital fund reserves, right? So to the degree that we can start doing that in a thoughtful, planful way while still mitigating risk, we can kind of reduce service charge needs, all else equal, due to that. So more to come on all of these, but I thought it would be helpful to at least kind of plant the seeds today so that as we move into budget introduction next month, you have a sense of what you're looking at and kind of what some of these drivers are. I'll close with my crystal ball. So some may be wondering, what does that mean for our rates, right? We've got increases, we've got decreases. Where do we land? You know, and I can say, for folks who remember last year, we came in around 9%. We were thinking that would likely continue. I can say we don't expect to be above that, and I think there's a good chance that we might come in a little bit below that. So that's about as much as I can say right now, just given that we're not done yet, and I don't want to say any more than that until we finish things up. But that's just to give folks a general sense of what we're looking at. That's kind of what we're hoping to see. But again, more to come on that next month as we move towards budget introduction. And then to that point, I just wanted to make sure that everyone's clear on kind of what those dates are to give you a sense. So, you know, briefly, next week we'll be meeting with owner communities, providing a lot of this same information along with what Todd presented in the last meeting, so that those individuals have a sense of kind of how we go about our capital planning and budgeting process. And then you can see the budget introduction, public hearing, deliberation, and approval dates throughout September and October. So that's what I've got to share today. Any additional questions that folks have before I finish up?
Okay, anybody else have any questions? None? Okay, thank you. that leads us to, something that I forgot to mention under the subcommittee is, I'm sorry about this, but I want to do it before I forget. Ref Tellis is going to be wanting to meet with every commission member, so about half hour or so. And I think Cassie's got kind of a sign-up sheet or something. So I think it's next week they're hoping to do these. So please see Cassie after the meeting, they would like to, it'd be phone call usually, I think. Okay, sorry about that. So that will take us to, Dana Reed, Enterprise Management Planning.
Good morning. I'm Dana Reed, Director of Enterprise Services and also the project manager for the ERP project. And with me today, although it's virtually, is Brianna Padron, who is with Very Dunn Consulting, which is the firm. See if we can bring her up here. There we go. Hi, Brianna.
Morning, everyone.
That's the firm that we hired to manage the ERP project with the district. So today we're going to cover what happened in quarter 2, the last couple months here. And it was a really busy quarter, although I do expect all the quarters to be busy. But we completed a employee survey, and I'll share some of the results with you of that. We did 18 fact-finding sessions, and Brianna will share what Very Dunn heard in those sessions. And Very Dunn submitted a needs assessment report, which you have in your packet. And then we'll briefly touch on next steps, and of course, there's time for questions. As a reminder, this is a long project. We have 5 phases. The first phase, which was planning, and we call phase 0, is complete. And we are in phase 1, which is conducting a needs assessment and defining our requirements that will go into our future RFP for the new software. This project is on schedule right now. It's good. Some quarter 2 progress by the numbers. We had 69 responses to our survey. I'm going to show you some of the results of that. We collected over 100 documents across the district, across different departments. Those were technical diagrams, procedures, policies, how-to guides, anything that could provide Very Dunn background before they came on site to do the fact-finding sessions. And I believe they told us in the last meeting that that was the most that an organization has submitted. So we did our due diligence there. We had 43 staff attend the project kickoff in May, and that's also available as an archive video for staff to watch. And then, as I mentioned, we had fact-finding sessions and the needs assessment report. So, and I should have designed all the slides to be on the left. I'm going to take a note on that. So the employee survey was anonymous. We wanted staff to be very frank about their challenges that they may have with our current system. We had 7 questions. They were ranked 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 strongly agree. We did give them a chance to tell us things in open-ended fields. There were 4 of those, and we received over 50 comments in those fields. The first question was, I believe we're committed to making this change, and this was, we've had some starts and stops with this project over the years, which isn't uncommon for an ERP project. These are projects that take a lot of heavy lifting by the organization. They're complex and they're expensive, and so that's not uncommon, but we wanted to know, do staff feel that leadership is committed to making this change and that we're moving forward? And you can see that we had over 50% that either agree or strongly disagree. A very small percentage that disagree, and then we have some in the neutral. So we're going to use this information as we do communications plan. We also asked if staff understand the business reasons for the project, and again, we had a very, very good response here on the agree or strongly agree. And I think that's also reflected in the comments that they also put in the survey, which is that they want a new system. They're frustrated with the current system, so they understand the reasons. This one will be very important for us as we develop the RFP and then as we evaluate the vendors who respond, which is that staff has indicated they really need training. And in the past, training has not been adequate to prepare them. And so we have a lot of work to do around training. One of the keys to a successful ERP project is that users adopt the system, like the system and use it and know how to use it. So we have work to do here when we get to the training piece. And finally, I wanted to share this one because this is something that we definitely want to take into consideration when we're selecting our new software. And this question is basically asking staff, do you want to change business processes for the better, maybe make them more efficient, better for customers, et cetera? And you can't do that because of our current software. So we have software that's limiting the business from improving. And so as we select new software, we want it to be flexible, configurable, and of course have the staff trained on it. Yeah.
Okay, so at the, with Lori's project on the, we just had with the Metrogro software, talked about it all being owned by the district. Is that going to be the same thing here that you're hoping, that we saw when they get to it, that one of the requirements will be software that's owned and manageable by the district?
So we won't own the software. I mean, it will likely be a product in the cloud that we subscribe to.
It'll be kind of an more open source?
Yeah, I don't know, Brianna, do you want to answer that since you have the experience with the vendor marketplace?
Yep. So typically, what we're seeing in the vendor marketplace today is a lot of the solutions are cloud-based software as a service. So very rarely will you see ERP vendors propose with an on-prem solution. So likely the district will see many responses from those types of vendors. And then the way that'll work is the master service agreement will include the X number of licenses for the number of users within the district. Does that help provide some context around that?
Yeah, it does. But I guess my concern is then we're always, if we need changes or whatever made to that software, then we're always going back and paying that vendor. And so I think I'm getting back to, for you to consider when you're doing this, what Ken's question was in terms of what are the ongoing expenses. And I think we're going to really want to know that tied down a little more since it's not going to be our software as with the Metrogro.
Correct. So when we go out to when we release the RFP, part of that package will be within the cost form. We ask vendors to detail their costs out to 10 years. We certainly see it go out to 15 too, if that's preferred. But within the RFP responses, we'll solicit that type of information as well as any kind of additional support costs. Many times vendors will support or provide rather extended support post go live in case there are changes like that. And those packages can vary depending on the vendor. So that information will be collected when we get to the RFP stage of the project.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, I wanted to show you some of the open-ended comments that we went through. These are some that were multiple respondents expressed excitement and support, so that's really good. Desire for continuing involvement in the project, and so again, that will inform our communications plan and some change management activities that we'll be doing in the next phase. Over and over again, we heard that it's challenging to get data and reporting out of our current system or systems, and so that will be key but that is in the new system for end users. And I mentioned inefficient, inconsistent processes are a frustration. And then this last one may seem obvious, but we work in different ways than 20 plus years ago when our current software was released. And so things like, I really wish I could, do my timesheet on my phone. Seems like a simple request, but I heard that a lot in the open-ended comments. So that will, of course, be a requirement of the new system also. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brianna, and she's going to tell you what Barry Dunn heard. They came on site in May for 3 days and did 18 fact-finding sessions with different department staff, and then they also did a tour, plant tour, which Lori Dunn gave them.
Alrighty, well, thank you, Dana. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brianna Padron. I'm a senior consultant with Barry Dunn. As Dana said, our firm is working with the district personnel to help lead the ERP system selection efforts. Myself, along with Austin Nichols on our Barry Dunn team, has been working closely as we begin to move through the beginning stages of the project. Barry Dunn's primary focus at this point is to really gain a solid understanding of the district's current system and their future needs as well. So one of the first activities that we conduct in a selection project like this is our fact-finding sessions, which oftentimes we see as probably one of our most valuable events in a project, just because we really get the opportunity to interact with many different stakeholders within an organization, understanding how they use the system, pain points they are coming across, so we can kind of analyze those results as we get into the next stage of an RFI and an RFP. So during the last week of May, our team arrived on site in Madison, and us as well as the district teams conducted that kickoff call that Dana referenced, as well as a series of fact-finding sessions. But prior to arriving on site, we developed a crosswalk for different HR and financial functional areas and arrived at these few, as well as a couple technical sessions in there and a couple add-ons as we went through the week. In addition to the crosswalk, that survey that Dana referenced had a few other questions too, just asking what ways people use the system, as well as some challenges that they had. So that, along with the information requests, really helped us build that background and that knowledge of how the district is currently using Oracle WAM today, along with Sage. During each session, they're pretty much structured the same, but the outcome is obviously all very different depending on the functional area. We asked questions about the district's business processes, as well as challenges the users were facing in the current system. And then we also highlighted, we wanted to highlight and ask what was going well as well, to kind of understand if there was anything helpful there. In these calls, there were a couple different district personnel. We did ask to invite some subject matter experts to help provide further explanations of the process. So overall, though, the week was everyone was very involved and collaborative, and we were able to pull a lot of great information that then helped us develop our needs assessment report. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So within this report, a majority of the report is focused on the functional and technical area environments, where those consist of summaries of each area based on just the business processes that were talked about, some of the inefficiencies, including how departments are tracking things that are either in the system or outside of the system. We really try to take into account all of the different systems that were used and not just Oracle WAM and Sage, even things that were tracked in a spreadsheet or approval processes that are done outside of systems, including on-base as well. So majority of the report will be that. And then following those two areas, we also, Barry Dunn provided a list of opportunities for improvement based on the challenges that we've heard and also some of the information that we know about the vendor marketplace. And we also used that to develop some key decision points for the district to review and kind of be thinking about. Some of those decision points were related to the approach for the project, including certain things like the timeline or what will be included in and out of scope of the RFP. But needless to say, everything within that report will help us move into the next stage of the process. And after the report was developed, we reviewed it in its entirety with the project management team, and then also reviewed it with the project management team and the steering committee to finalize the report at the end of last month. So before moving into next steps, I wanted to pause there and ask if there were any questions on that process.
Anyone have any questions? I got a more general question. Does the software tend to be Windows-based?
Not typically. What we've seen, we see a lot of vendors, since it's software as a service, it's accessible through web browsers a lot of the time. And that can vary depending on the vendor, but that's typically what we see. You don't have the application as you used to. Many times it's accessible through the browser, so that way you can log in from multiple locations and through tablets in your phone and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions?
See a hand up on Zoom.
Commissioner Rummel raised her hand.
Oh, Commissioner Rummel raised your hand. I can't see that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Rummel, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It was so thorough that I would say it was a little overwhelming. But I think that's probably good to see the complexity of what we're facing. And I guess I would defer to Commissioner Freeze, but as a city alder, I dealt with our own ERP thing. It's probably a decade ago. So in some ways I feel we're not behind, but I feel like every decade I'm going to go through something like mind-boggling like this. But my question really is, when I read through all the different platforms that were required, and I know that in the summary it said some would maybe go away. Can you talk a little bit about what's like fundamental in addition to what we're going to buy new with what we already use? So I have a good understanding of like what the skeletons are that we need. Like, for example, EDP goes away, but unknown time, those kind of things.
So that will actually be in the next step of our process. So now that we've developed the report and we have an understanding of how the district, different processes that the district uses today, along with the systems, we've developed the report as like a foundation point to help deliver and develop our request for information that we're planning to release next week, which is very high level at this point, including everything within that report right now, just to help the district get an understanding for what the marketplace looks like and solutions that might be a best fit for you folks. Following the once we receive the responses back from vendors, we'll develop an ERP strategic plan and conduct some outreach sessions to help engage some of the district members that were also included in those fact-finding sessions. So we can just understand what type of functionality is out there. And then following all of that, we'll start to finalize the requirements for the request for proposal. So around that time, after we have an understanding of the different solutions that are out there, we'll be able to finalize what will be in and out of scope for the RFP, which will then ultimately be in scope for the implementation. So long answer to say that's still a work in progress. The PMT and the steering committee have worked and discussed kind of what that looks like right now, but I know discussions are still ongoing just as we continue on with the RFI process and the vendor outreach sessions.
Yeah, this is Dana Reed. I'll just add to that. So we know that systems will go away because their functionality will be in the new ERP software. There'll be some systems that stay for a while but will eventually go away. And there will be systems that possibly can't go away. So we already know we're going to have 3 different levels. There is also going to be a requirement to keep data around because of records retention policy or because we need it to make decisions. And so that will be another decision point for each system, what data needs to stay does that mean the system stays around so people can access it to get the data, or do we take the data out and build a data warehouse or something? But yeah, we're still, like Brianna said, we're still working on all of that.
Thank you. And just one more comment. When I think about what the city went through, we had so many more agencies than the district does. So it was much more complicated. And then incorporating some of the agencies took a lot more heavy lifting than already is part of the program. So, you know, it makes me think that it will be hard for everyone to do, but eventually it'll be like, oh yeah, this is how we do it now. So it's just a timing thing. And I really appreciate your thorough report. Thanks.
Thank you. And on that note too, I do have to applaud the district team as well. Really, the level of involvement Austin and I have talked about is far beyond what we see a lot of the time. Between the PMT and other stakeholders, everyone was very, very collaborative, providing lots of information, and have been really involved in the review of the report as well to make sure that we are documenting it right as well. And I think that we'll see that go a long way as we start to develop the requirements for the RFP and then ultimately select a preferred vendor. So, yeah. Just some final remarks on the next steps. We've talked a little bit about them, but next week we'll look to release the request for information to the vendor marketplace. Once we receive responses back, we'll develop an ERP strategic plan to kind of help roadmap a little bit what we expect to see or what we're hoping to see as we get ready for the request for proposal. In October, we'll come back together with some additional stakeholders to do some vendor outreach sessions. Those vendors that have responded, just to having an opportunity for the district folks to ask some questions and see what their proposals were all about. And then from there, we'll work to create some functional and technical requirements that will be included in the RFP. Barry Dunn will help kind of guide that process based on the database and the knowledge that we have from vendors and solutions right now. And then we'll have a series of sessions similar to the fact-finding sessions where we finalize those and confirm that they should be included. And then at the end of the year, we'll look to release the RFP and come back at the beginning of the year to review responses and talk next steps.
Okay.
That's all we had.
Okay. Anybody else have any additional questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Great.
Look
Thank you.
forward to seeing the, probably in December or January. Okay. That will move us to the District Adaptive Management, Yahara Winds, Mike Gilbertson.
Morning. My name is Mike Gilbertson. I'm the Watersheds Program Coordinator here at the district. I'm here to share with you the results of their 2023 annual report. Oh, right here. Okay, thank you. The agenda for today's presentation, start out with a quick review of Yahara Winds, followed by the actual numbers attained from our 2023 annual report. I also want to share with you another report that we submitted to the DNR this year and some of the information and key takeaways behind that report. Finally, some information about projects and ideas that Yahara Winds is looking for in future projects to continue success and going forward. Again, starting with the basic elements for the background of Yahara Winds, that is phosphorus. And the district is regulated for nutrients, including phosphorus, in our discharge. And although it's an essential nutrient, excessive phosphorus can cause water quality issues. And those water quality issues realized and led to the development of the 2010 phosphorus rule and the development of more stringent phosphorus water quality standards for surface waters. With that, then, the Rock River TMDL was developed using the new phosphorus standards. The TMDL is a regulatory tool for all sources of phosphorus described within, including point sources, urban stormwater, and non-point sources. The Rock River TMDL requires over 96,000 pounds of phosphorus reductions from the Yahara watershed. The Yahara watershed is a 540 square mile piece of the entire Rock River Basin. Again, a way to look at the different sources described in the TMDL, is looking at point source discharges like treatment plants. We have point source discharges from MS4s, and also non-point sources, primarily agricultural runoff. And without all sources working together to meet the goals of the TMDL, we will fail in meeting our permit requirements. In other words, in the Yahara watershed, if only point sources are working on it because they have the permit and the regulatory tool to drive reductions, only half the reduction goals will be attained. Treatment plants and MS4s have permits requiring compliance. Non-point sources do not have permits, and often the regulations are difficult to implement. In addition, if we decided to achieve permit compliance on our own, there's significant cost to the additional treatment. Only downstream of our outfall will see minimal water quality benefit. Additional treatment is not cost effective for our communities, and we have missed the opportunity to contribute to work in the watershed for improving the Yahara chain of lakes. The land use map aligns with the assigned reductions needed from all sources, as the bucket showed previously. The map allows you to visualize the vast partnership opportunities between point and non-point sources and emphasizes the need for all entities contributing to a collective watershed approach for improving water quality. Again, a quick look at what the actual cost of tertiary treatment would be for the district. The estimated cost was around $200 million when this information was put together. And the cost of this to remove a very small amount of P, something like 1 to 2% of the remaining 5% left over after the current treatment process. Again, spending a lot of money to remove a very small amount of phosphorus. Therefore, adaptive management is the best choice for a compliance strategy to meet state phosphorus standards. It's a cost-effective, watershed-based approach with all sources working together to generate innovative and flexible options to meet the goals of the TMDL. This is Yahara Wins. Now shifting to look at some of our watershed-wide phosphorus reduction accomplishments for 2023. We reduced over 54,000 pounds of phosphorus from the whole watershed. This exceeds our 2023 goal and is also currently exceeding next year's goal. So in a way, we can look at it as maybe a year ahead. However, we need to be careful with that because we won't know for sure whether or not we'll maintain exceeding next year's goal until we receive the results of this year's crop season, and that will be shared with us next year. So that's a good sign. We're seeing more implementation in the lower parts of the watershed and increased phosphorus reductions throughout. Dane County, Land and Water Conservation, and Yahara Pride Farms continue to be our main implementing partners. If we zoom into the watershed, we find additional reach-specific highlights to mention. Most of our reductions come from the upper watershed, but we are seeing increases in other areas as well. We recognize the challenges in some of these reaches, like our own reach 65, Nine Springs Creek, where the conversion of cropland to urban development is limiting the opportunities to implement current practices to reduce phosphorus. So we'll need to find another way. It's not just the total watershed reduction number that we are required to meet. We're required to meet reach-specific reductions as well. And work is needed to get there throughout the watershed. Again, continuing on a reach-specific look, a few points I want to make when we look within these specific reaches. We'll have increases and decreases every year, depending on the amount of conservation practices installed. Of course, we want to see more conservation installed, but the reality is some people stop implementing practices. And that might be part of the reason behind sort of that reduction you see up there in, let's see what reach it is there on the right, the blue reach, 66. Thank you, Amanda. The red circles are highlighting a few reaches that are currently exceeding what our reduction goals are for those reaches at the end of this project. So they're already exceeding what the goals for the reach at year 2036. Those are great indicators of success in future years. However, those won't be realized until we have those reductions in place at year 2036. The reason we review each reach annually is to make strategic decisions with our implementing partners for meeting future reduction goals. Perhaps developing a targeted approach, as we mentioned in Reach 65. And the table on the left is just to show you examples of the annual ramp up of reduction goals that we need to meet each year, with examples for the near future, 23, 24, 25, kind of the next few years, but then also skipping to the end of the term to kind of show what are the ultimate goals of phosphorus reductions that we need to achieve, both watershed wide and also within each specific reach. This slide kind of speaks for itself in highlighting the work of our implementing partners. Our three partners currently putting conservation practices on the ground are Yahara Pride Farms, the Dane County Land Conservation Department, and the Rock County Conservation Department. As you can see, the most of the reductions come from Yahara Pride Farms and Dane County, getting us to, our 54,000 pounds total this year. There's almost over 30,000 acres of cropland conservation implemented by Yahara Pride Farms. The number of farms Yahara Pride is joining their cost share program has increased. And the key takeaway here is the amount of leveraged resources coming from the money that we give to Yahara Pride Farms in our agreements. Beyond the money that we gave to Yahara Pride Farms, they were able to add into that an additional $583,000 based on the desire by producers to go beyond the limits of the cost share program and pay for additional practices out of their own pocket. We see the same thing with Dane County. Again, a lot of pounds of reduction, a lot of acres under conservation, a lot of work with a lot of partners. And again, this idea that stretching our dollars further applies with Dane County as well. They use their own resources to go beyond the resources that we give them, and they're allocating over $600,000 of their own resources in cost sharing. I also like to emphasize the effective partnership that we have with Rock County. Although a small area of the watershed is contained within Rock County, about 8%, which limits the opportunities that they may have to find practices to install. But they have been effective in installing grass waterways, harvestable buffers, perennial forage conversion in some acres. In addition, they've also gone through a lot of turnover in employment. New staff are there, so there's a little bit of time and work that they're going through to get back up to speed. And through recent conversations with Rock County, there are some additional projects in the works that are coming forward here. So they're still active, even within the limited area that is available to them. In addition, with conversations with other implementing partners, we're still hearing that more producers are joining in to the programs. So we expect, so the outlook for continued growth next year is positive. Not only do we have our implementing partners putting conservation practices on the ground, we also rely on the USGS as another partner to lead our monitoring program and develop water quality analyses for us. The table on the left just lists the 10 sites currently in place for Yahara winds that are distributed throughout the watershed. So that's where our data is being collected, like I said, throughout the watershed each year. A key takeaway from the graphs on the right, not to get bogged down in the details within, is to look at the way the plots is trending, and that phosphorus concentrations are trending in a downward direction, and that's a good thing. We have this type of information for all 10 of the sites described in the table on the left, but I'm only showing the examples of our current analyses at an upstream and a downstream site, or upstream and downstream locations. Looking further into the data, the graph on the left is a continued. We've continued to expand on this year after year since this was started representing our sites during the pilot years of the program. Again, we're seeing this continued trend in phosphorus concentrations as we go forward. We'll always have peaks and valleys due to the weather impacts and climate change, but the goal is to smooth out the lines over time. And again, phosphorus concentrations appear to be trending down. The graph on the right I share with you is another assessment of phosphorus loads from similar sites in the upstream area that also show phosphorus trending down. Again, that's a good thing. More information is also available online in the USGS Water Year presentation to Yahara Winds at our December 2023 meeting, and that presentation is available at our Yahara Winds website. Again, it's the ability for relying on USGS to not only maintain our monitoring sample frequency to share our concentration data, but also demonstrating their ability to take the data, normalize it, and work through their process and their expertise to even show trends in phosphorus loads. And together, we continuously see this decreasing phosphorus trending in the watershed. Shifting gears to an extra report that I'm sharing with you today. Consider this a DNR audit of Yahara Winds. And it's an audit of the adaptive management program and assesses our methods for quantifying phosphorus reductions. We work closely with our implementing partners and the DNR to generate the information for this report. But more importantly, it validates the success of Yahara Winds. It validates the annual phosphorus reductions that we report out are real. And it validates our status as a national model for reducing phosphorus runoff to surface waters. This was recently submitted at the end of July, so we don't have feedback from DNR yet. We hope to have approval of this report shortly, and I look forward to sharing with you the results of this review at next year's update. Finally, a look ahead at some of the things we are looking at to ensure that we are meeting our goals into the future. We're working with a consultant to review and recommend adjustments to our cost model to meet the financial demands of future phosphorus reductions. The cost model was developed early in, obviously early in the years of Yahara Winds, and a lot has happened since then. And so those impacts we're looking at, or how those are impacting the costs to continue our successful implementation going forward. We're also working with the USGS to make necessary adjustments to our monitoring strategy so that we collect the appropriate data to meet our future specific goals, and to be able to describe find different ways to describe Yahara Winds success. We are looking at ways to increase our implementing partners to find more areas of phosphorus reductions. One way is to develop another implementing partner within the district in our own biosolids program. We also are pursuing a federal grant to bring in additional funding resources for projects in the watershed. Finally, up to this point, it's been about finding as many pounds of phosphorus reductions as possible, and we have proven that we can do that. But we realize going forward, and as described in REACH 65 and the challenges presented there, is that we need to strategize and come up with a different way for reductions in these specific reaches that pose these challenges of meeting our REACH specific goals. So that's a conversation we'll be having with our implementing partners, and thinking of more things instead of our the common cropland type practices that are implemented today, we might be thinking more of things like dredging, similar to suck the muck and those kind of projects that are out there, and perhaps other things as well. But we're gonna have to look for, in these, are gonna be costly. We realize that, but understand that we need to adapt to finding new solutions and through targeted implementation into the future. So with that, that's all I have for the presentation, and happy to answer any questions you may have or clarify anything from the presentation.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Beth?
Hi, this is Commissioner Brooklyn. Thank you. The report looks really good, and it's promising that we're actually exceeding our phosphorus levels ahead of time. That's really good. Just a quick question around monitoring. When you collect your samples, are they grab? Are they composite samples? How often do you do the question?
This is Marty Griffin, Ecosystem Services Director. So we have different types of sampling. So sometimes they are grab samples and sometimes they are composite samples. So what we have is two monitoring sort of tiers. One is what we call storm chasing. So when we have a lot of rain, we have samplers that are continuously collecting, and those are going to be like composite samples, right? But then we also have this specific certain time of the month that we go out every month and collect samples through USGS, and those are considered grab samples because they're done on the same day every month. So sort of a combination of different sampling protocols.
Marcia, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Maybe this is my dumb question, but when it looks like 78 farmers have contributed so much to the majority of the phosphorus reduction, help me understand, are there farmers that we still need to recruit to this program versus, general landowners and producers, which I guess I'm not quite clear what the distinction is. I mean, are the farmers close to like a waterway, or is it just any farmer? Help me. Thanks.
I would say it's pretty much any farmer that they have found is interested in implementing practices and participating in our Yahara Pride Farm cost share program. And again, those 78 farmers described there are just the 78 farmers that are working with Yahara Pride Farms. There's a lot more producers, landowners that may not be connected with Yahara Pride Farms at this point, but might be working with Dane County and benefiting from programs there. So 78 farmers is just the number that's working with Yahara Pride Farms. And even this year, through conversations with Yahara Pride Farms, we're seeing additional farmers connecting with their cost share program. So that number appears to be going up even next year, which is a challenge for us. But there's always, we're not there in that we haven't reached all farmers to participate in reductions with Yahara wins in whatever capacity or whatever of our implementing partners. And we may never get to all of them. And there's more work out there, put it that way, to install practices on a lot more ag land than what we currently have now.
Thank you.
Okay, I got a question. That the management requires, I think it was 50% or more of the watersheds be non-point of the phosphorus contributions be from non-point source. And, treatment plant, and I even think most urban sources are point source. So you showed the graph of the agricultural at 50%. So are we right at that cutoff point with 50% in your early part? It might be
when we talk point source, usually that's tied to whether the entity has a permit or it does not have a permit.
Oh, I thought it related to if it was like urban, you have a discharge point because typically for most situations coming from a controlled, not all, but many situations comes from a controlled point of from a basin.
Yep, it's easy to see what a point source discharge is when we're talking about a wastewater treatment plant like ours.
Okay.
End of pipe. and industries have an end-of-pipe discharge. Those are easy to see. Urban stormwater, yes, they have their collection systems, their stormwater collection systems, and there's an end-of-pipe as well there. But they're regulated with an MS4 permit, and they have to meet conditions within their permit. So that's how we look at those two as permitted entities.
Just a quick clarification that how MS4s are treated, they're on this bubble. They're really non-point. For some purposes, they're treated as point sources. But President Hubble, for purposes of your question, NR 217.18, which is adaptive management vision, talks about some of the non-point sources and the permitted MS4s has to be 50.
Okay.
So they try and,
okay,
it's
so
both.
that answers,
Okay.
that answers my question. Okay. Okay, anyone else? No, thank you very much. And that will take us to the Bill, Executive Director update.
We covered several important items today. We're going to cover even more in the next two meetings. Polite way of saying that you should expect the next two meetings to be at least as long as this one. Thank you very much for your commitment to the district. Amanda has an update.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Amanda Wagner, Communications and Public Affairs Director. Ben made a nod to this in his presentation, but we do have an owner community meeting next Tuesday. It is an in-person meeting, 11:30 to 1. We will be providing some similar information to what Ben presented today, as well as what Todd presented at our meeting 2 weeks ago. And all the commissioners did receive emails. I understand that some may have went to spam. So if you're interested in attending and I haven't already asked you, please let me know. We are providing a light lunch and look forward to having our owner communities back in person for a meeting.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, you have any update on, quickly, on the Nine Springs Valley Interceptor down by Goose Lake?
Good morning, Commissioners. Lisa Coleman, Director of Engineering. I think this was on the agenda as Theron. Theron is not here, obviously. I am not Theron. He is out working on fixing the pipe right now. So he sends his regrets and looks forward to talking to you when all of this is done. So I do have just a very quick update. You can go, I won't even bother with this dumb thing that never seems to work, Amanda. If you could just go ahead. Yeah, just maybe it does. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it ever works. So I'll just say, I know the tried and true way that it happens. So, all right. So we've got here's a map that shows where this is, just as a reminder. So we're just by Goose Lake there, and so just wanted to give you a quick update on what we've been doing since we talked last. So on to the next slide, please. So that's just a slide. So what's see, I'll read through Darren's slide here. So we have done some televising of the line. We haven't been able to televise the whole line because there's so much debris in it. And also there's a offset joint a little bit further down that's preventing us from getting in from the other direction. But we have been able to at least see what we need to see. We've been doing daily flow monitoring and watching, the pump station flows and all that to make sure that we're not having a blockage or a problem further downstream. We have the bypassing pumping system installed, which is what you're seeing in the slide there. It is operational, so it's a pretty beefy system. Those are big. There's nobody standing next to them, but those are big pumps. And then there's the discharge from the pumps there is HDPE pipe, so that's a, fused HDPE piping. It's not some little flimsy hose. It's a pretty beefy piping system that's pumping the flows. And then we've just been providing regular updates to O&M staff as needed, that kind of stuff, so everybody knows what's going on. We have been working with the contractor on site to coordinate, based on what we're seeing, how do we think we need to repair this thing, getting the supplies in, all of that stuff. They have the city of Madison work with us with their vectors to do some of the cleaning of the pipe. We've also had a contractor, Vichy Sewer on site, working on cleaning the pipe as well. We're actually gonna probably have to manually, you know, a person inside the pipe bucket out some of the waste that's in there because it's very difficult to get that pipe cleaned out. So, but what's happening right now is and if you want to go to the next slide, so they've got a shoring system in place, they've got a dewatering system in place. They have excavated down to the pipe. They're actually working on replacing the section of pipe that's displaced today. We hopefully should have that piece installed today. We want to also place some other internal joint seals in a few places where we can see leaks, and then we'll have to button everything up again. So that's the quick update, and we will provide you with another update hopefully once we're done. We are kind of seeing that this might be a larger issue because we're seeing some degradation of that pipe. Now that it's been exposed, we can see, concrete rebar on the outside of the pipe, which is kind of concerning. So that might be an indication that this pipe is, in worse shape than we thought throughout the pipe run and not just in this one spot. So I think it's a little older than me. So I believe it's I forget what the exact year is, but I think it's late 60s vintage.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Paul, regulatory and legal?
Well, I'm pleased to say, given the lateness of the meeting, that I don't have much to report. The legislature is not in session. There's a couple of rules we continue to monitor, but there's really been no further developments this month, and we'll continue to monitor next month.
Okay, future meeting schedule is let's see, we've got the next meeting, 8/22, will be in person, and the subcommittee will be meeting at 7:30, and the commission meeting again at 9. Then I think the meeting after that, the first meeting in September, is actually scheduled to be virtual. I was checking my phone, but...
No, the meeting on the 12th of September is still in person, and
Okay.
of course, a hybrid option, but that meeting we are intending to start at 8 because that is when you'll be hearing about the Badger Mill Creek Stakeholder Group project portfolio. So we will be having members of the group here for that.
Okay, thank you. So the 9/12 meeting is in person, but at 8 o'clock, because we're not anticipating a subcommittee meeting before that. The subcommittee will have a little bit more work to do, like deciding on panels and stuff like that, but that can come down a little bit more. So that's the future meeting schedule. Any agenda topics? Any other business? One thing I did want to mention is CARPC is acting on the district's request this evening, and then they kicks the timeline over to the DNR when they have 30 days or something to act on it. So probably by around the 12th, we'll know what the final decision is. And adjournment, Tom?
Tom Wilson, move we adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by
Commissioner Clark.
Commissioner Clark to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.